you hear me? Yeah, good, perfect. Thanks a lot again. Today I want to talk a little bit about myself. Dan said it. I started QuestionPro back in 2005, actually in my garage in Seattle. We were too cheap to buy the servers, so we just assembled all the servers ourselves. I'm super excited today to have all of you here. Obviously, it's been a journey for me. It's a personal journey for me. It's been super hard. I've been so excited about like getting all our customers together, all our employees together. That has been one of the things that that I have always wanted to do. And a little bit background about myself. I'm originally from India. I went to Russia to study actually. I didn't get into any of the IITs in India. I really wanted to study computer science, computer engineering. I wasn't able to get there. Went to Russia for 2 years, and then I transferred to Provo, Utah. So it was a pretty good, difference between Russia and Provo, Utah. And then I moved to Seattle, started the company. It's been fun. Honestly, it's been super fun. I don't think I'd do anything. I don't think I'm employable anyway. So separate issue. We're about 300 employees all up. We have, a huge team in India. We have a big team here in the States, also in Mexico. We've expanded globally. And it's been obviously we've had customers throughout the globe, and it has been a fun journey so far. Today, I just want to talk about kind of technology in general, right? So, if you think about it, in the last 1 year, I would argue there's been a tectonic shift in terms of the core underlying principles of technology. So, if you think about tech, earlier on, it was collect, retrieve, store, collect, store, retrieve, rather. So all tech can be kind of thought about in that particular way. But in the last year, with the advent of generative AI and LLM tools, it's basically collect, process, and recommend. It's a big shift in terms of how we think about core underlying tech principles, really. So what does that mean? It means really new possibilities have emerged. Right? Things that we didn't think was fundamentally possible is extremely actually within reach and can be done, right? And I'll walk you guys through a couple of ideas that we've implemented over the last 1 year or so, or 9 months, I would argue, in terms of experimenting with new ideas about how to leverage large language, especially AI and large language models, into our day-to-day workflow. Within research, within CX, within workforce, within everything that we do. That's the key part of what we are doing right now, is to kind of leverage, figure out how to take all the technology components that we have and integrate into our operational workflow. So as you can see, I'll talk about 4 things, AI and productivity. Quant and qual are merging. It used to be like, hey, quants, a few guys do quant, a few guys do qual. I think the merge has been, and I'll walk you guys through a pretty interesting use case and an amazing kind of model that we've implemented. And also from a data, we are obviously a data company. We collect a lot of data. We want to humanize that, right? So we want to make sure that when we collect data, people know that they're giving us the data and they feel good about it. So that's part of what we do. And the last thing I want to talk about is synthetic data, which is a new concept. It's a little bit controversial. That's why we do it. But again, it's a new concept. If you don't try new ideas, I believe that if you don't try new ideas, we're not going to move the needle. So I'm always up for trying new ideas, and failing, it's fine. But we gotta give it a shot, really. So that's kind of at least what I want to talk about in the next 20 minutes, 30 minutes, really. First thing, everybody talks about AI. We all think AI is all about productivity. That's the key part, 10x productivity. So which means you can get 10x output out of what you were doing yesterday. Can that be done? Absolutely. We've seen that happen in many cases. I'll walk you through a couple of use cases in terms of where it's truly kind of like it's a wow moment in terms of productivity. So most people think of AI as like, oh shit, it's gonna take over our jobs, this, that. It's really a productivity enhancer. That's the way we look at it. So anybody who's not using AI is effectively not necessarily counterproductive, but kind of like not leveraging the tools. Same as if you think about like SaaS tools and online cloud is also a productivity enhancer way back when, right? So you're like, okay, 5 people can collaborate on a Google document. It used to be send the documents back and forth, and then the collaboration wasn't there. So that was a productivity enhancer. The same argument I would apply for AI is that you can now be 10x more productive. So if you take a look at the kind of the research kind of model that most people, almost all of us use, you have these kind of 5 phases, right? The way we look at it is that in each of these phases, you can inject AI into it. So AI is not something that, oh my God, we do something separate. It's in the workflow of what we do. First of all, if you say AI is about productivity, that means you look at the product, you look at your workflow and say, how can you improve your workflow? How do you optimize your workflow? How you can speed up your workflow? And ultimately, Thomas Friedman said it, productivity is everything. Ultimately, from an economics perspective, that is the most important thing from a just general purpose economics perspective. So the first thing is we added this concept of kind of creating surveys. So when you want to create a survey, you don't know the questions you want to ask, we can recommend questions, right? So we can go out and say, like, I want to create a survey about an event satisfaction model. And we, the AI engine can go out and add questions, into your survey itself. So if you don't know the kind of questions you want to ask, we can give you recommendations, right? And it's an automated system. So you can then choose all the questions you want, add it to your survey, really. The second thing that we're adding is even if you have 1 or 2 questions in the survey, we can suggest alternative questions or extending the survey into different questions. So these are kind of inbuilt tools. They're not magical. They're like effectively inbuilt into the system to make sure that, it is contextually aware of the kind of survey you're doing. So if you're saying like, hey, if you're Aquafina and, running a survey about, water, obviously, or the branding associated with it, our engine will recommend a few more questions to your survey. And it's up to you to either, accept, deny, or kind of like, add it to the mix. That's an example of kind of as you build the survey, these are all generated questions based on, soccer World Cup, really. So that's a great example of like, you just have a concept and we give you kind of like a bootstrapping way of getting started, because that's, writer's block, mental block. It actually helps you go through that process. The second part of our journey is around kind of analytics, realistically, if you think about it. So in terms of analysis, typically we are used to dashboards and everything else. And now what we can do is like really have an interactive model with the data. Like you can ask questions to your data. So you can say things like, hey, how does the sales team feel about this company? This is a survey that we did for QuestionPro itself, an employee engagement survey. And, we were able to give, clear answers. So, so the managers in the company don't need to go out and look at dashboards. They can interact, ask questions to the data set that we have. So that's again, in my mind, that's a productivity enhancer. They get answers to this question in a natural free flow model, if you will. And then the final thing around the kind of the research process is, again, once data is collected, presented, we believe that, data should be held in a repository that is taggable, searchable, queryable, so that other people can use it, right? This is not about just you presenting data to your boss, to your stakeholders, but having kind of a corpus of information that builds over time. My background is in software and software development. We would not ever imagine starting a software product without a repository. That's kind of like, source code repository is the first thing that any software developer would look at. Same argument applies to a sales team. Sales team would not start a project without a CRM tool, right? There's got to be a source of truth, source of record. And in the insights world, in the research world, it's largely PowerPoint decks floating around. And they're not very searchable. They're not very taggable. You can't ask questions to your PowerPoint deck. And more importantly, you need to ask questions across all your PowerPoint decks, even if you were able to do it. So you need to have some sort of a system. So we believe it's a very strong kind of use case for kind of adding AI to kind of like a corpus of data. It's, you can call it a knowledge management tool, a knowledge sharing tool. And it's more than just a SharePoint drive or a Google Drive, right? So where you can actually look and ask for data. The second broad theme I want to talk about is like this merging of quant and qual, really, right? So imagine this, like you have a survey and you really want to know something about a particular kind of instance of a user when he clicks on a particular option, effectively, right? Say like, okay, I really like Aquafina. I really want to dive deep into why do you really like Aquafina? At that point, you're actually doing a qualitative kind of construct, really, right? And typically, the model has been like, hey, let's run the survey, get some data, and then run a focus group independently, right? What we are proposing now is as you go through the survey, in a particular instance, in a particular question, with a particular context, we can start a chatbot right there for that particular user because he or she has followed a path, and that path is what we are really into, right? So we really want to know why somebody likes Aquafina, and then you can we can integrate that with a chatbot in real time. So then they go back and forth, and the questions are auto generated. That's the genius over here, is that you don't come up with a set of questions. The questions are based on the answers that people are giving, almost like a moderated kind of chatbot, if you will. But that's done inline in the context of a survey, right? So you think you're running a quant study, but what you can do is at one point say, hey, look, in this particular scenario, for this particular user, we really want to go deep into this particular point, that if they selected this particular option, it's very, very useful for brands when they're trying to figure out why go deep into why something was selected, right? So we call this deep dive, and then I think this is going to be our kind of merging of quant and qual. This is an example of how we plan on merging quant and qual together. The final thing that we believe in is kind of like, effectively, like in the survey process, in the data collection process, we want to humanize everything. We want to make it kind of visual. We want to make it easy. We want to make it appealing. That's why we spent an enormous amount of time making sure all the surveys render perfectly in all devices across the entire spectrum. And it's easy to take, easy to use, and we've gotten a lot of kind of like feedback from both customers and respondents that it's super easy to take, right? Whether you're using a phone or a tablet or a desktop, doesn't really matter. We want to make sure that the mechanics of kind of collecting data itself is easy. And today we're gonna I want to talk about one kind of enhancement to that. We are calling this visual mode for surveys. So we are taking the survey should not look like a survey. It should look like an interactive interface, right? With rich media, with good visuals, and we've seen 50% increase in response rates by enabling rich media and amazing visuals. And which means okay, if you're taking a McDonald's survey, it looks like a full-on McDonald's McDonald's store with the logo and everything. It doesn't even look like a survey. It looks like an interaction, if you will. So that's visual mode for surveys over there. That's an example of how things can look. It doesn't even look like a survey. It has all the backgrounds, the visuals. And the good thing about this is you don't need the entire system is done point and click. So you could go upload images for your brand, set this whole thing up without any kind of CSS or developer or nobody you don't need to know HTML or any of that stuff. You can go point and click and build a survey like this within frankly minutes. The second thing is LiveCast, which is our real-time video feedback tool that I want to kind of showcase. Again, a lot of data that we are collecting is point and click, but also people want to give out rich data. Today, thanks to kind of all the tech upgrades, nearly everybody can use the phone, use the browser on the phone, and give you audiovisual feedback straight up, right? We're using the phone, so we can send a link out and they can send a video file back. Simple. With zero kind of like technical issues of sorts. Partly because all the browsers have kind of evolved into where they support, almost all of them support audiovisual input. So I think LiveCast is going to be more and more we see customers asking us to say hey, we want to collect a survey, but also we want to collect audiovisual feedback. A lot of times that's used for presentations, where you actually have a qualitative kind of component to a presentation. And for that, you need some customer giving out a particular kind of, making a point. And so that can be done using LiveCast right now. And the final thing is Video Insights, which is kind of like our solution around videos, but within the video, as the video plays, it's typically used for kind of, media testing, if you will. As the video plays, you can create different kind of breakpoints within the video and ask questions. The video will stop there. You can ask questions and keep going. So think of it as an inline way of understanding how a video is being perceived without going into hey, look at the video, then come back. No, it's as you see the video, questions start popping up on your screen, and the respondent takes the question as the video goes by. So these are all kind of small examples of how we want to kind of unlock certain possibilities. If you think about it. And the final thing is what I call synthetic panels and synthetic sampling. So like I said earlier on, it's a little controversial. We're all used to doing surveys with human beings, obviously, collecting data from human beings. But I think that there's a mechanism by which we can use synthetic data. So what is synthetic data? So that it's effectively artificial data created by large language models. What it does is we have data about a particular person or about a particular respondent, and we use that data, right, to see if we can answer a new question, right, without actually going out and asking the question to the respondent realistically. So obviously, like I said, it's controversial. Most people think it cannot be done. We've done some basic analysis. The good news here is that we can do compare apples and oranges in the sense that we can run the test and we can actually ask the question and see if our test correctly predicted the answer or not, really. So I wouldn't say we've solved the problem, but we are definitely working very, very hard in this area to see how we can move the ball further. So we've done some internal tests. As long as the new question is somewhat similar or relevant to other questions somebody has answered, we can pretty correctly predict how they'll answer the new question. So obviously there are cases where we are not able to predict, but there are cases that we are able to predict how a person would respond. And we believe that this is going to kind of, I would say, like, not necessarily revolutionize, but definitely kind of change how we think about audience and sampling. Because now, if you have a corpus of data, if you have a community with 10,000 people that have taken hundreds of surveys over the last 5 years, so you have a lot of data, right? And is the next question relevant to any of the 500 questions that they've answered? And if it is, then we can predict what the answer is going to be. So it obviously reduces cost, right? So like, okay, you're not actually sending the survey out, you're predicting based on earlier models. So the big, you got to ask, the big question that's asked is like, hey, is it just like demographic prediction models? And these things have existed for very, very many years. No, actually, they're not based on demographic prediction models. They're based on LLM models, which is the neural network, really, right? So if you think about it, it is based on kind of correlations between hundreds and thousands of variables, not 5 variables. Demographic prediction models are based on, hey, you create a bunch of models based on 5 or 10 or 20 variables. But LLM models are based on billions of parameters. So that's what it is. So the LLM models are a little bit more kind of different than kind of algorithmic prediction models. And so we are leveraging the LLMs to kind of see if two questions are similar. If two questions are similar, can we predict the answer to that question? So that's kind of where we are going forward with synthetic data, if you will. And here's a couple of examples of how kind of like initial testing we've done, where, like I said earlier on, as long as the question is somewhat similar contextually, right? It doesn't have to be exactly the same content. Contextually, if it is similar to previous questions, then we can, with a fair degree of certainty, say like, well, we know how this person would answer because we've seen him answer these kinds of questions in this particular way in the past. And since all the LLM models understand English or any language, it's not based on like data, it's based on the language itself. These things are getting pretty accurate, if you will. That is kind of all I have for us today.